Good morning, and thank you for the chance to come and present this morning. As introduced, my name is John Clarke. I'm a senior advisor with the Boston Consulting Group, with whose help and my colleagues this morning, Antoine. So you'll see lots of his slides in here as well, so we work together very collaboratively. It is a pleasure to be here. As you can tell, I unfortunately don't speak French, so I will try and slow down a little bit. I am Irish, so I speak very, very, very fast. My discussion today with you is one about adapting the IT operating model. And you may ask, why have I chosen to present this topic? Well, really, it's what I suppose people like myself and Antoine get very involved in doing. We spend a lot of time working with organizations about trying to change and alter the position, the role of IT. I do this with both financial clients and clients in retail, in consumer goods, so across a variety of sectors. So what we try to do here is bring in one or two of the themes that appear to reoccur as I talk to clients. I think at the end we have a few minutes for questions as well, so I look forward to that. If, by the way, if somebody at the back suddenly thinks I am speaking too quick, just wave your hand in the air and I can slow down. So really I want to really just cover three simple things. From an IT point of view, both what we have done, what did we do to respond, and how do we respond going forward. And these are three things for, I see, both geeks and bosses to think about on a daily, hourly basis. So it's quite clear that over the last 30 years, what is still a fairly immature industry has matured at a phenomenal pace. We have come from an era of mainframe and MRP type systems into a realm of client-server and greater speed and greater consumer-centric activity, into Web 1.0, into a great industrialization of IT, a mass growth in storage and in computing and the application of Moore's law, into now an era of digitization, or in one of the ways I describe it, an era of iPadnization, where basically now we are at a point where there is unconstrained ambition and unconstrained potential in what technology can do. And one of my basic themes here in this presentation, and at the end I'll tell you now, and it's contentious, is that technology can do amazing things. What gets in the way is sometimes our people and organization and behavior. And my offer is, how do we improve those the same way, and in doing so really exploit the value of technology? So we've also seen, and this has been a very traditional thing for most CIOs, that we've also industrialized and accelerated the productivity gains that come from IT. We have generally moved away from, a cost of IT, a cost of company going in line, to actually now creating more capacity, more capability for less and less. IT has done a fantastic job at delivering productivity gains in terms of IT itself. It can do more now than it's ever done, and generally for spending less. And people like that. One of the downsides of that, though, is you get used to that kind of delivery capability and the idea that you can always get less and less and less cost for more and more and more output. And how have we done that over time? Well, it's quite clear there are generally four levers that organizations apply. One has been through standardization and consolidation. Agreeing to do things in a standardized way, consolidating activity onto one singular platform, generally brings through benefits. But even in these modern times, it's not unusual to see a lot of argumentation around the resistance to do that, even at the basic infrastructural level. There's been a great focus on the specialization of IT roles and the optimization of process. Again, trying to really describe what that person does in IT and how to make that person more effective. And generally, as you do a lot of IT organization design work, it's probably the most tricky areas about describing what exactly is the thing that that person does. But as you do that, you can leverage great benefits. Offshoring and outsourcing has certainly played a major lever in improving productivity in IT, trying to utilize third parties, utilize differences in economies of scale, and utilize collaborators has brought great yields to companies who have taken the gamble and the ambition to learn how to work with external parties as one of their core strengths. And IT governance. IT governance has really brought forward a far better understanding of how you manage the IT asset. What it is, how you leverage it, how you control it. Because as a growing important asset, it is important, but it also brings with it a risk. So over time, what have we done? We've moved towards a higher degree of commonality, under generally a central governance. But basically, there isn't much debate around the infrastructural consolidation, though you'll still find open questions around the degree and extent of enterprise applications, of process standardization. One of the challenges for a CIO these days is certainly, buying a packaged system is very desirable, but with that comes a lot of hidden cost as well. For some players, they've actually gone back into developing their own systems to get unique competitive advantage. So it isn't a question of just buy or build and buy, or build and configure. There's also a question of developing unique core systems yourself. The challenge comes when those two things need to coexist. So one of the greatest challenges is that coexistence strategy that organizations face. And that's where things get a bit stuck. So how have we responded? Well, for CIOs, certainly in IT leadership, we've all worked towards a kind of generic, normalized IT production model. An IT production factory, if you will, where we can be efficient and effective at delivering services. A software development house, one, two, several, internal, external. These two major engines of capability working together to work with the business, to align itself with the business, to achieve the business aims. Around that, we've seen activities around shared services and other realignments of activity and process. So this is how we've done it. In essence, this was it. We've created a factory of growth, or factories, and tried to align those with the business. And in normal, predictable, growth-based times, that has been a good model. But it is now a model that's very heavily challenged. It's delivered the goods, it's delivered benefits, but it is now heavily challenged. Again, as we've done that, and there are a variety of organizational models, none of these being wrong or right, we gravitate towards generally a federal model of IT managing IT, the business managing the business, and between the two, a degree of hybrid resources working together to bring out benefit. And it's in that hybrid overlap space where sometimes the greatest challenge lies. It is quite clear when we work with clients in our roles, or CIOs and geeks work together, there's two aspects to delivering big transformational benefit. One is technology change, but the other is process renewal. The first one of those is challenging and daring and risky. The second one is even more so. But it's only when those two come together you get fundamental transformational change. So whilst the organizational structures are nice, they sometimes hide away the complexity that organizations have yet to work out how to work together better to achieve transformational change. That's not an IT problem, it's not a business problem, it's a we problem. And if you look at organizations like Sanofi here, have typically, and this is not unusual, applied this to an organization, a very good model, with some degree of centralization. Here on the left-hand side, core IT functions, and more on the right-hand side, more federated activities. So CIOs, IT leadership try to manage both activities. As you apply that model, you'll have, again, global, consolidated, common systems, applying the idea of standardization, normalization across the globe. Do not differ from this unless you have to. And when there is an exception, prove the exception. Into then business areas, also trying to achieve the same things. My own personal experience of now probably 20 plus years doing this is certainly the top part is very hard. Trying to sometimes get a business to behave globally as one business is very, very difficult. But again, in IT, that's what we kind of rely on. So there is that healthy conflict or challenge of alignment that still occurs. Again, other organizations, Procter & Gamble, how they tackle this? Well, quite simply, for a very ruthless application of principles. A, to simplify what they've got, take out any unnecessary complexity and make it simple. Again, many people, many organizations overlook this very simple step. It is the greatest thing you can do. Next, to standardize. Once you've done that, make it common and consistent. In Tesco, we call this Tesco in a box. The principle is the same. It said basically wherever you went to in a Tesco store, a bit like a Carrefour store globally, you'd see the same procedures, the same systems. And then mechanize or automate. If that activity can be done by a computer, an algorithm, a process, then let it be done so. And doing that has yielded huge benefit. As that was done in P&G, they did that alongside an IT transformation. And IT functions have been transforming. And in some cases, very radically and very courageously. And again, they've gone through usually a process of standardization, a move and consolidation of shared services, offshoring, outsourcing, and then business process outsourcing. A fairly typical, traditional step. What we see now, though, actually organizations go through this not once or twice, but it's a repeated exercise. This isn't you just do it and that's it. You must always come back to that and see what it can be refined over time. So when you do a renewal, 3 years later, you'll be doing the same one again and again and again. There's always more to be looked at. We see that, yes. So what was happening here? Well, here I've applied the Wise Mirror model for market disciplines. And their model, if you know the model, said actually, as an organization, you can be very good at one thing. Either operational excellence, product leadership, or customer intimacy. That was their hypothesis. A very popular book. Had an application for IT because certainly if you choose one of those dimensions or disciplines, it has a very strong bearing on your architecture, on your ecosystem, and on your focus. Designing a series of systems to be operationally excellent can be very, very different to going for product leadership. Going for product leadership versus a customer system can also be very, very different. So again, as those things coexist, it becomes a challenge. So what has happened? In my view, basically, IT is traditionally focused on operational excellence. And in particular, IT operational excellence. What that looks like in reality is we measure IT as a cost of revenue, IT as a percentage of product cost, IT versus cost of customer. But it's really about improving the cost of IT and its operational efficiency. And in doing so, over time, that's created between those disciplines a series of KPIs and measures of how well we, an organization, are doing. And over time, those measures, those KPIs, become very much what guides a company. Very much true in Nokia. Nokia coming from a product-centric company where it got used to very good cost bases. That KPI became almost a distraction. Because once you have a KPI, generally, related to cost, there's only one good way for that KPI to go, and that's down. Less and less cost. And you'll see in a short while, that becomes a problem. So what began to happen? What began to happen at Nokia? Well, what began to happen was this. And most of the large mobile operators now have the same challenge, as do the telcos, as do the banks, is they realize the one asset they really have got but don't know much about is you, the customer. And they began to look at this and realize that, well, hold on, here in this case in Nokia a few years back, we had a common identifier for a customer across Nokia, so therefore we know the customer. Not true. Because when, for example, in this case, in this example, a customer would buy, say, Nokia music, and they would call, after having a problem, the help desk, well, they wouldn't know what you purchased and when. So yes, there's an identifier, but there wasn't a kind of a common consumer profile for seeing what you've done. Again, when that customer received multiple emails, SMSs from Nokia, and it calls up and say, I don't want these emails, or why am I getting these emails? The answer generally was, I have no idea where they're coming to you and why, because I can't see this kind of privacy contract we have with you. Again, a very fragmented view of customer. So in reality here, large organizations, small organizations have been and are now trying to catch up in terms of developing a better understanding of the customer. And this has been a real constraint. So they've had to build up now capabilities. And you'll see now many organizations, in particular, will look at the one here on this far side, Amazon, seeing what it can do with data and customer insight across any industry. So it's become almost a kind of a reference case for what can they not do. Because if they can do it, then we're threatened, whether we're a bank, a retailer, or whatever. So rapidly there's been this kind of shift in IT to try and become very consumer-centric. So what was happening? So let's go back to that model. So we've delivered IT operational excellence. Very good. But they've become to recognize that really customer and customer intimacy is key. So we must know our customer because we've gone as far as we can go with our product and our operational efficiency. Now, according to the hypothesis was you can't do all three. You have to do one in particular. My challenge to that model to you is I think you have to do all three these days. You can't be deficient in one area. And therein lies a real problem. The second real problem becomes this. Once you've gained that insight, customer intimacy, doing something with it is incredibly hard. So as we talk to operators, device companies, marketing companies, retailers, they've spent a significant amount of money on capturing consumer touch points, a significant amount of money on storing that data. but candidly and honestly are very challenged in doing something with it. Again, very true for Nokia. Might explain where they currently are and why they may improve. But one of the real challenges about it is one thing to collect data, it's a whole other thing to do something intelligent with it. Converting customer insight into a new product requires something fairly significant. Taking data in and managing it and keeping your operational efficiency efficient, very challenging. So what you also see here is basically between these kind of disciplines in organizations, they've almost created this lock-in. They're locked into the old world. How do you apply these new disciplines into the existing legacy, the existing way of thinking? And therein lies the constraint. So all this time, IT needs to think about how does it really live in this ecosystem, where suddenly an organization wants to exceed in all three, but also an organization has put in place KPIs that kind of limit and constrain growth and investment, but also an organization that needs to learn how to leverage these things better. And one of the options, of course, being here is if a company A, who have a particular strength in one area, cannot expand in the other areas, is to work with company B and form some form of collaboration. So what we're now seeing, organizations looking for partners who can work together to create a greater, more holistic capability. And so more than often, you'll see organizations faced with this kind of picture. Who do we work with? Who are our partners? How do we integrate? How do we coexist? For IT functions, this is a great challenge. Because in essence, what we become as an IT function are superb integrators, working with multiple parties to work together to recreate what our company wants. It was hard enough doing it internally. It's a lot harder now doing it externally. But if you can create those value chains. If that wasn't enough, what's happening here? What is happening here? Well, look carefully at the graph. And think about the first slide. Over 30 years, the improvement in IT, the efficiency, the effectiveness. But here, 2007, 2012, a fairly short period of time. The swing in organizations. Nokia, classic example. 60% market share. 2007 would sit there, look at the world domination. It would look at Motorola, who had lost market share and think that was good. Competition gone. It would see Apple produce its first type of phone. I remember the presentation well. They picked up an Apple iPhone and said, what does Steve Jobs know about doing a phone? It would appear quite a lot. Things change very quickly. Android, a very geeky operating system at the start. Definitely loved by the geeks, used by the geeks, and nobody but the geeks. I say that in a very positive way. But now, a market share of more than 40%. And look at the profits. Apple market share, 12% in this graph. We're showing profits of 75% of the market. Radical change. I think there's no way, and I used to see the research reports going back to 2007, 2008, even the most ambitious of forecasters and strategists didn't predict such a shift. And that's not to say going forward, it won't shift again as much, in whatever direction. So what does that mean? Well, it means it's also not unique. Blockbuster video. Big landmark, big logo, very familiar. Gone. Good business case, what replaced? Now Netflix. Fundamentally using technology, fundamentally changing a business model, fundamentally working at a whole new speed of operation. So what happens? What happens if we can no longer reasonably forecast the future? What happens to IT? Because if you've not seen it so far it's getting harder and harder and harder. Now it's just got exponential. So, how do you respond to that challenge? Well, a few things have happened. One is what's had to become another core skill of IT is a change of dynamic rate, or as I refer to it, a speed of need. One of the kind of unwritten kind of requirements that you'll get is speed. Can I have something when I want it? I can't give you much sense of what it is I want. I'll know when I want it. And when I tell you what I want, I'll want it right away. It's one of the key drivers. How do you create things at the speed of need? But also, how do you leverage brand? Because what has brand now done? Apart from now being a fourth axis, it's also made organizations aware what they've got is their brand. What makes them strong is their brand. Google, Apple, what have they got? Strong brands. Amazon, strong brand. What does that give them? It gives them the chance which says, if I can leverage my brand, I can do anything I want to do. I can be a retailer, a telco, a bank. All based on brand. All based on IT. So now we're challenged because now there are four things to think about. And also what we had to do is really move the operational excellence into the operational excellence not of IT, but of the business. And now prove and demonstrate how we can improve the business, not just IT. And this, for many IT organizations, is where they get stuck. They can show how well they can improve their savings. They can show how well they can do things a bit quicker. They can't show it doing as well for the business. How much more is the business doing and better? So there's a real demand. So that's placing huge demands on IT itself. So what does it start to do? It means we start to push out information technology. It means in our new operating model, we have to start capturing and acquiring relevant data before the business know they need it. Because if you think about the speed of need, one of the things about the speed of need is if you wait to be told what it is they want, you'll be too late. And there is a real dilemma. Because usually in IT, you have to justify what you're going to spend and why, but in all reality, you're going to have to take some English term, a punt, a bet on acquiring relevant data. You're also going to have to help the business recognize where they can go to and help them recognize there are hidden patterns in the data. Because where else can you do that apart from IT? But again, acquiring relevant data, pattern recognition are not unique or common IT skills as far as I'm aware. We also have to leverage better real-time insight. Because the world does happen in real time. The world doesn't, like a batch system, capture data, process it, and tell you an answer a day later. It all happens in real time. And it must continually evolve the business model. Because as Netflix shows, these things change very quickly. What was good last year may not be good next year. So they look to IT not as a provider of technology, but also somebody who can help them spot these worrying signals about, do you know, it's possible to do that now at a fraction of the cost and actually in a very different way than the way you used to do it previously. And that lets us, as CIOs, reshape the information landscape. Because it is reshaping and does require a reshaping. So are you capturing information today you've always captured? Or are you more and more capturing things that you think might be necessary going forward? And we need innovation at the speed of need. Because we're going to get more ideas coming through. More ideas will go exponential. Because if you've got a strong brand, you're going to have to basically maximize that funnel of ideas. Ideas create more experiments. Experiments often require laboratory tools. Laboratory tools come from usually IT. They'll want to see from those either improve speed or reduce cost. Again, generally more IT, financial systems, feedback, benefit realization. They'll also understand how that will lower the cost of failure. How can it do more experiments for lower cost? Does it also give the organization a better kind of sense of predictability? Because what we're trying to do here in this new ecosystem, these new operating models, is enhance our forward-looking ability. Not to execute the today good, which is a given, but also execute the forward requirement even better. Very difficult. And then when I want it, not only at the speed of need, I want it rapidly scalable and rapidly global. And rapidly, I'll retire it next year. Which again, in working with many IT organizations, one of the problems they have is that. Building things up, closing things down, takes time. Because of the process, the behavior, the traditional way of doing things. All fairly traditional. So these are characteristics that aren't traditional to IT. And yet any operating model must now reflect these things. Because you are trying to create in the organization a culture of experimentation. But that's also true of IT itself. Is in your IT organization there a culture of experimentation? Again, and organizations have done this, or trying to do this, as they work on aligning the operating models of IT, achieving both integration as well as standardization. Either a diversified model or a unified model. That alignment between the business and IT has never been in more development than is always needed. It still requires much work. The vast majority of what I do is all about trying to achieve alignment between business and IT. And so organizations, what they've had to do is put those two things together, which is basically you can't afford to be in just one box. You have to achieve all things again. The idea of modality. Often IT wants to put itself into one particular box. Perhaps you need to be in every box. And to be so requires a radical thinking in how you set yourself up and how you work. Yet as we do that, you're still going to be driven by the challenge or the misalignment trap of being accountable to the business and yet being efficient for the organization. Because neither of those two in isolation will work. You can be very accountable and very aligned with the business, but in all reality, you'll spend more and get less. Or you can be very efficient for the organization. Again, you'll spend a bit less, but you'll get even less return. What you have to do here is maximize those two. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do achieving that balance. So how do I suggest you respond? For a new IT operating model, I think there are three key things. Well, I should say there is one thing to avoid. When we talk about operating models, people immediately think about organizational change and restructuring. That could be a part of the process, but it's not the only thing. What it requires is fundamentally, how does your operating model allow you to create these innovative partnerships? How do you create a portfolio that inspires innovation? A portfolio that's robust in terms of supporting the run of the business and the change of the business? Secondly, how do you establish a new modality, a new way of working? How do you create an organization that is not one size fits all? Because a physical supply chain is very different to an online e-commerce business, is very different to an analytical business, is very different to a corporate business. How do you blend those together? How do you create a new funding model? Because the old funding models don't work. Because if you're going to have to start investing in acquiring data you don't know you need, somebody's going to have to pay for that somehow. So what's the funding model look like? How do you use benchmarks not only to save money, but also to invest money? And again, in your operating model, to what degree have you got that radical experimentation in how IT works and collaborates? At the same time, how do you drive through the performance of IS and the business? Again, that continual focus on productivity versus cost efficiency. So for any new IT operating model, you have to have a fairly balanced view of achieving all these three things. What we tend to see is people will choose just one of these, and that will skew the operating model perhaps in the wrong way. So it is a call to action, and it's something I'm fairly passionate about because of the following reason. That over time, technology is making a greater contribution to organizations and society. It's a given. Technology is a wonderful thing. However, the IT organization, the professionals here who are trying to help it become, sometimes will not take that leap. They can themselves become the constraint in their ways of working. So the challenge and the opportunity is this. How do you really tackle that in the operating model? How do you create a DNA in the way of working within IT to make it actually stay online with technology? How do you get it to reinvent continually its ways of working? How do you get it to continually reimagine what it can do in terms of delivering a greater contribution? How do you get it to rethink about what are its value and its insight it brings? And rebrand the way in which it delivers. And where that comes true, by the way, look at the touch points of IT. Because IT is great sometimes, we as IT professionals, are making great promises. An emotional commitment, a rational commitment. It'll be fantastic, it'll be lovely, it'll be wonderful, and it'll be cheap. In all reality, what I get isn't wonderful, isn't great, and it ain't cheap. And I have to warn you, do pay that one a lot of attention. The touchpoint experiences. But think of this. If you can do all those things, then you're on the blue curve. You're really maximizing the contribution. But my dilemma is this in working with IT organizations. A, they're full of wonderful people. But B, sometimes IT, despite working with the most cutting edge of technology, the most exciting technology, can sometimes be the slowest to change itself. And we perhaps need in IT, and he'll be here today, I think, or tomorrow, Philip Stark a bit more. That kind of thinking, more designer thinking in IT, to radically change what IT does, and radically change it says, let's not do that any longer. Let's let go of that. And to do that, it requires a real liberalization of our behavior, our thinking. If we can behave differently and think differently, we can contribute magnificently.